You've revised, you've worked hard, you've done all your Medify questions, you've done so many past paper mock exams on the UCAT, but you still didn't get the grade that you expected or wanted. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Jacare and I'm a student studying in London. And in this video, I want to talk about how you should go about applying to medical school if you didn't do as well as you wanted in your UCAT. The UCAT's a really difficult exam, and even if you're very academic and very able, it's unlike any exam you've really seen before. And so naturally, a lot of academic people or a lot of people who prepared still don't do quite as well as they want to on the day for a number of reasons. Maybe they just weren't confident enough, or maybe on the day the nerves got to them. Whatever the reason is, it's not the end of the road. A big misconception is that you need to do really well on your UCAT to be able to apply for medicine. However, in this video, I'm going to talk about how you can selectively apply to medical schools in the UK, even if you don't have a high UCAT score. As usual, timestamps will be in the description below, so you can jump around and find exactly what you're looking for without wasting any time. Now, in this video, obviously, I'm going to mention certain universities you can apply to, but firstly, I just want to talk about the 4 main approaches or things you should start considering if you've just gotten your UCAT and it's not what you wanted. The first thing you can do is, like I've mentioned, you can apply selectively. Now, this is what the majority of this video is going to be about, so I'm going to go into more detail about this a bit later on. But the 3 other things you can do in order to kind of increase the likelihood of you getting into medical school is you can also target medical schools that are relatively new. So a lot of the big medical schools, especially in London and just all across the country, which have been around for many years, typically have quite high UCAT cutoff. But if you look at really new universities, maybe medical schools who've only been around for 2-3 years or so, chances are they either have a really low UCAT cutoff or they don't even look at the UCAT at all. Now, I'm not going to mention any unis in this list because depending on when you're watching this, the list could vary. But definitely look out for any medical schools that have maybe just newly popped up and aren't as popular, because chances are, in order to get more students, they're not going to set the cutoff as high as other unis. Another thing you can do, which is something I'm not going to go into too much detail about, is you can apply through foundation year to get into medicine. Now, again, this is up to you to research, but a lot of universities offer the full medical degree along with an additional foundation year. And typically this is for students who either maybe didn't do sciences at A level, or maybe just didn't meet the academic requirements to go straight into medicine, and the foundation year essentially kind of eases them into it. Now, typically those universities have a much lower cutoff point, but again, it varies, and there's quite a lot of unis that do foundation years, so it's definitely worth looking into. And the 4th thing you could do is you can sit the BMAT exam. Now, I know a few people who decided to sit the BMAT exam solely based on the fact that they weren't as happy with their UCAT score. Now, the BMAT and UCAT are similar in some senses, but for the most cases are completely different exams. It could very well be that you don't do well on the UCAT, but you do really well on the BMAT. And with those reasons out of the way, I'm going to go more into detail about the first point I talked about, which was about selectively applying to unis. I'm going to mention a few universities, and I'm going to give you some details about the way they view the UCAT. Links to all these universities' websites will be in the description, as well as hopefully some useful links there as well. Now, the first university is Cardiff University. They don't look at your UCAT score at all, which sounds really surreal, but I'm being serious. They don't have any UCAT cutoff. They mainly focus on your academics, so your GCSEs and A levels, as well as your personal statement. Now, as with most of the universities on the list, the way they decide who to give out interviews to is based on a point system. So the higher the grades you get, the more points you're awarded. Now, if you're someone who's applying to Cardiff in year 13, then they'll look at your GCSEs. So if you're someone who maybe didn't do well on the UCAT, but you have a good set of GCSE grades to back you up, then it's worth applying to there, and you'll probably get a lot of points racked up based on the grades you got. If you're applying to this university, it's also good to make sure you've nailed your personal statement. Now, the only time Cardiff look at your UCAT is when they're comparing you to another applicant who has the exact same points as you based on their grades and personal statement, and they just need that final factor to kind of differentiate. Next university you should look at is Keele University. Now, unlike Cardiff, they do have a cutoff, but their cutoff is very low compared to other universities. The only 2 clear rules they have is that if your UCAT is in the bottom 20%, or you got a band 4 in the situational judgment, then they'll immediately cut you off. But if you don't fall into either of those categories, then Keele should definitely be on your radar. In 2020, their cutoff point was 570. 570. Now obviously this is subject to change depending on when you apply, but 570 is very low relative to other universities' cut-off point. If your average is higher than that, then it's definitely a uni that should be high on your priority list. Now obviously this uni still looks at your UCAT and they give you points based on how high your UCAT score is. However, they also give you points based on your A levels and your GCSE grades, and so in the bigger picture of things, the UCAT actually has relatively little impact. Now obviously this does rely on you having good GCSE and predicted grades, and if that's you, then having a bit of a lower UCAT grade can be more easily overlooked by them. University number 3 is Plymouth University. Now their cutoff is slightly higher than Keele, and I'll put on the screen kind of their cutoffs over the last few years. Now this is a good university to apply to if your UCAT was around the 600-ish mark. Now Plymouth is a really good university for people who aren't very confident with their situational judgment test score. I know a lot of people who on the day kind of don't do as well and kind of hit that band 3 or band 4, and that makes it really hard to apply to certain medical schools. But the good thing about Plymouth is that they don't look at the SJT at all. Another good thing about Plymouth is once you've reached the interview stage, your UCAT has no weight whatsoever, and their decision to give you an offer is solely based on how well you do on your interview. University number 4 is Lincoln University. Lincoln University have a really interesting way of scoring your BMAT. So like the other unis, they also give you a score based on how well you did, but instead of looking at the average as a whole, they look at each of your individual sections, and depending on what range it falls under, they'll give you a certain amount of points. So for example, if we take decision making, they'll give you a certain number of points if your score is between 601 to 700. They'll give you another amount of points if your score is between 701 to 800, etc. Now the really good thing about this is, let's say you get 610 on your decision making, for example, you will get given the same amount of points as someone who gets 700 on their decision making. They will have no way to kind of distinguish between you two. So that's why I think it's a really good university to apply to if you're not very happy with your UCAT score. Even if you do not so well, you're not going to be seen any differently to someone who might have done better than you, because once you kind of break it down, the point system doesn't really reveal how good or bad you did. The same applies to the SJT. You're given a score based on what band you get. However, it should be noticed that if you get a band 4, they'll probably cut you off and they won't consider your application. You're also given points for your academics, but the thing with Lincoln is they do put more weight on your UCAT score, which is a bit annoying. But like I said before, the way they do the point system can mean that even if you haven't done so well, you can still score quite a high number of points. And for that reason, it's definitely worth considering. Now, the University of Nottingham do a similar point system with the ranges, but I haven't included them on the list because they're slightly more competitive and you want to increase the chances of you getting in as high as possible. The fifth and final university I want to talk about is the University of Liverpool. Liverpool University look at both your UCAT and your academics. However, when deciding who to give interviews to, the way they kind of split the weighting between UCAT and academics is 25% UCAT, 75% academic. So here you can clearly see that even if you don't do well on your UCAT, if you've done well on your GCSEs and your predicted grades for A levels are high and you're working towards a high grade, then you have a very likely chance of getting an interview. I think in 2020, a score of 600 average was seen as a very competitive score, so kind of use that range to decide whether or not University of Liverpool is something you should consider. Like a lot of these universities, they don't look at applicants as band 4 in situational judgment, so if you got a band 4, you probably shouldn't apply to Liverpool University. So kind of to summarize, I guess it's still going to be competitive, it's still going to be challenging, you still have to do interviews and practice, but I guess the main takeaway here is even if you don't have a good UCAT score, if you feel like you have really strong GCSEs and you're working towards really high levels at A level, then you're more than capable of still doing medicine. Don't forget that at the end of the day, a medical degree is a medical degree. Whether you graduate from Cambridge or you graduate from a lower ranking university, at the end of the day, when you see a doctor, you don't really pay attention to what degree they have. You can still be a very capable doctor, and I don't think it's smart that if you've done poorly in your UCAT that you should waste away all your options applying to the competitive unis. At the very least, have 1 or 2 unis in your options that are from maybe this list or maybe another uni you've searched up. Another thing to quickly note is that the universities I've mentioned in this video aren't the only universities that have low UCAT cutoff points. I've kind of just picked and chose a few, but don't let that stop you from doing your own research. I'll definitely leave, like I said, some useful links in the description, and hopefully with your own research and selective application you'll be able to study medicine and still get in despite not doing well on your UCAT. Thank you so much if you've made it this far. If you've enjoyed the video, then obviously leave a like, subscribe, and let me know what you thought in the comments below, or if you have any questions or suggestions. That's been all from me, and goodbye.